The courtroom fell silent as the bailiff led her in. Marcus Washington moved with quiet dignity despite the chains at her wrists, her athletic frame still commanding respect, even in the orange jumpsuit. Judge Elena Hartman looked up from her papers, and for a moment their eyes met across the polished wood barrier that separated their worlds. "Your Honor," the bailiff announced, "the prisoner has requested a private audience." Elena's fingers tightened around her pen. She hadn't seen Marcus in 3 years, not since the sentencing. The woman before her looked different now, thinner perhaps, but there was something else, a stillness that hadn't been there before. "This is highly irregular," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Marcus stepped forward, the chains clinking softly. "I know, Your Honor, but I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." She paused, and Eleanor noticed the tremor in her hands. "Time is running short for me." The words hung in the air between them. Elena had heard rumors through the prison medical reports that crossed her desk, but hearing it directly was different. She nodded to the bailiff. "Give us the room." "Your Honor, protocol." "I said give us the room." When they were alone, Marcus spoke again. "I have one request. Just one." Her voice was calm, but her eyes held something Elena couldn't quite read. "And it has to be you who grants it." Elena leaned back in her chair, studying the woman she'd sentenced to 25 years. "Why me?" "Because you're the only one who can make this right." Marcus reached into her pocket slowly, producing a folded piece of paper. "This is what I'm asking for." Elena took the paper, her judicial training warring with her curiosity. As she unfolded it, her breath caught. The request was written in careful handwriting, each word deliberate, but there was something else, something that made Eleanor's hands begin to shake. Eleanor read the words 3 times, certain she'd misunderstood. "This is what you want, after everything." Marcus nodded. "It's all I want. All I've ever wanted, really." "You understand what you're asking is—" Eleanor searched for the right word. "Unprecedented. The court doesn't have to do anything," Marcus interrupted gently. "You do. Just you." Eleanor stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the city. Below, people moved through their lives, unaware of the moment unfolding in this quiet room. She'd built her career on following the letter of the law, on maintaining the boundaries between justice and mercy. "Why now?" Eleanor asked without turning around. "Because I finally understand something I didn't 3 years ago." Marcus's voice was soft but clear. "And because if I don't ask now, I never will." Elena turned back, studying the woman's face. There was no manipulation there, no angle she could detect, just a quiet certainty that was somehow more unsettling than any plea would have been. "If I agree to this," Elena said slowly, "there will be questions. Investigations, probably. My career, I know what it will cost you." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "That's why I'm asking. Because you're the only one who would understand why it matters." Elena looked down at the paper again. The request seemed simple on its surface, almost mundane. But she could see the layers beneath it, the implications that would ripple outward like stones thrown into still water. "I need time to think about this." "Of course." Marcus's shoulders relaxed slightly. "But, Your Honor, there's something else you should know before you decide." Eleanor waited, her heart beating faster. "The request isn't just for me." Marcus's eyes held hers. "It's for someone you know, someone who's been waiting for an answer for a very long time. Before we discover what Marcus's last wish truly meant, we'd love to know where our listeners are from around the world. Drop a comment telling us your location, and if this story moves you, leave a like to help us share more stories of redemption and humanity. Now back to Marcus's story. Elena returned to her chambers that evening, the folded paper burning a hole in her briefcase. She poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands and sat at her desk, staring at the wall of law books that had guided her for 20 years. The request was impossible. It violated every protocol, crossed every line she'd sworn to maintain. And yet, she pulled out the paper again, reading it for the 10th time. The words hadn't changed, but their weight seemed to grow with each reading. I request permission to speak at the memorial service of Officer David Chen. I have information about his final moments that his family deserves to hear. I was there. I was the last person who saw him before the incident, and I need to tell them the truth about what he did for me. Elena's breath came faster. David Chen. The officer who'd been found unresponsive in the prison infirmary 3 months ago. The investigation had been closed, ruled a tragic accident. But there had been whispers, questions that never quite got answered, and Marcus had been in the infirmary that same night. Elena reached for her phone, then stopped. Who could she call? Who would understand the impossible position she was in? If Marcus knew something about Chen's final moments, the family deserved to hear it, but allowing a prisoner to speak at an officer's memorial was unthinkable. Unless... Elena pulled up the case file on her computer, scrolling through the details of Marcus's conviction, assault, resisting arrest. But as she read deeper, she noticed something she'd overlooked during the trial. A notation in the arresting officer's report, a detail that had seemed irrelevant at the time. The arresting officer had been David Chen. The next morning, Elena arrived at the prison before dawn. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through possibilities and consequences. The guard at the entrance looked surprised to see her. "Judge Hartman, we weren't expecting you. I need to speak with prisoner Washington immediately." The guard hesitated. "She's in the medical wing, Your Honor. She's been there since yesterday evening." Elena's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. She's just... The doctors say she needs to be monitored more closely now." The medical wing was quieter than the main prison, the fluorescent lights casting everything in a harsh, clinical glow. Elena found Marcus in a small room at the end of the hall, sitting up in bed and staring out the barred window. "Your Honor?" Marcus turned, and Elena saw the exhaustion in her face. "I didn't think you'd come. I have questions." Elena pulled a chair close to the bed, lowering her voice. "David Chen was the officer who arrested you. Why didn't you mention that in your request?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Would it have made a difference?" "It might have. It changes the context of everything." "Does it?" Marcus shifted, wincing slightly. "Or does it just make it more complicated?" Elena leaned forward. "Tell me what happened that night in the infirmary. Tell me what you know about Chen's final moments." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. "If I tell you, you'll understand why I need to speak at his memorial. But you'll also understand why it's dangerous for me to do so." "Dangerous how?" "Because the truth about that night..." Marcus's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "It's not what anyone thinks, and there are people who want it to stay that way." Elena felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "Marcus, if you have information about an officer's passing, you have a legal obligation." "I know my obligations, Your Honor." Marcus's voice was firm despite her obvious fatigue. "But this isn't about legal obligations. This is about a man who showed me humanity when no one else would. And I owe him the truth, even if it costs me everything." Elena studied the woman before her, seeing past the prisoner to the person underneath. "What did Chen do for you?" Marcus's eyes glistened. "He saved my life, not in the way you might think, not physically, but he saved the part of me that still believed in redemption." She paused, gathering her strength. "That night in the infirmary, I was at my lowest point. The walls felt closer each day. I'd given up hope of ever being more than what everyone saw when they looked at me. And Chen, he was doing his rounds. Found me in a state. Instead of writing me up or calling for backup, he sat down. He talked to me like I was a person, not a case number." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "He told me about his daughter, about how she'd made mistakes too, but he never stopped believing she could change." Elena felt something shift in her chest. "I didn't know Chen had a daughter. Most people didn't. He kept his personal life private." Marcus looked directly at Elena. "But that night, he shared something with me, a secret he'd been carrying. And then..." Marcus stopped, her face going pale. Then what? Elena pressed. Then someone else came into the infirmary, someone who didn't want Chen talking to me, someone who had a lot to lose if certain truths came out. Elena's mind raced. Are you saying Chen's passing wasn't an accident? Marcus closed her eyes. I'm saying that what happened that night is more complicated than the official report suggests. And I'm saying that Chen's family deserves to know that his last act was one of courage and compassion. But you're not telling me everything. No, Marcus admitted, because if I tell you everything now, you'll be in danger too. The only safe way to reveal the truth is publicly, at the memorial, where there are witnesses and cameras and people who can't make it disappear. Elena stood, pacing the small room. Every instinct she had as a judge told her to report this conversation immediately, to launch an investigation, to follow proper channels. But another part of her, the part that had chosen law because she believed in justice, not just procedure, knew that sometimes the system failed. If I grant your request, Elena said carefully, and you speak at Chen's memorial, you understand that you'll be making yourself a target. I understand, and you understand that I can't protect you from the consequences. I'm not asking you to protect me, Your Honor. Marcus's voice was steady. I'm asking you to help me do the right thing. For Chen, for his family, for the truth. Elena walked to the window, looking out at the prison yard below. Prisoners moved in their designated areas, following the routines that structured their days. From up here they looked small, anonymous. But each one was a person with a story, with choices that had led them to this place. She thought about her own choices, the career she'd built on being fair but firm, on never letting emotion cloud her judgment. But what good was judgment without wisdom? What good was fairness without compassion? Tell me one thing, Elena said, still facing the window. Why do you trust me? Marcus's answer came quietly. Because 3 years ago, when you sentenced me, you looked me in the eye. You didn't look through me or past me, you saw me. And I knew then that if I ever needed someone to believe in the truth over convenience, it would be you. Elena turned back to face Marcus, her decision crystallizing. I'll need to speak with the memorial organizers, Chen's family, the prison administration. I know. There will be conditions, security measures. You'll be under constant supervision. I understand. And if at any point I believe you're manipulating this situation or putting others at risk, I will shut it down immediately. Marcus nodded. That's fair. Elena moved closer to the bed, her voice dropping. But I need something from you first. I need to know who came into that infirmary. Who are you protecting by staying silent? I'm not protecting them, Marcus said. I'm protecting you. Once you know, you can't unknow it. And the person involved has connections that reach far beyond these walls. Marcus, please, Your Honor, trust me on this. Let me reveal it at the memorial, where it's safe, where the truth can't be buried again. Elena felt the frustration building. As a judge, she was used to having all the information, to making decisions based on complete facts. But Marcus was asking her to take a leap of faith, to trust in something she couldn't yet see. I'll make the arrangements, Elena said finally. But Marcus, if you're wrong about this, if you're putting Chen's family through additional pain for nothing, I'm not wrong. Marcus's certainty was absolute. And when you hear what I have to say at that memorial, you'll understand why this was the only way. Elena gathered her things, preparing to leave. At the door she paused. Chen's daughter. What's her name? Marcus met her eyes. Sarah. She's 17, and she deserves to know that her father's last act was saving someone's life, even if he couldn't save his own. The arrangements took 3 days. 3 days of phone calls, negotiations, and carefully worded requests that revealed nothing while promising everything. Elena met with Chen's widow, a quiet woman named Jennifer who carried her grief like a physical weight. I don't understand, Jennifer said, sitting in Elena's chambers. Why would a prisoner want to speak at David's memorial? Elena chose her words carefully. She claims to have information about your husband's final moments, information she believes you and your daughter deserve to hear. Jennifer's hands twisted in her lap. The investigation said it was an accident, a medical emergency. They said he didn't suffer. I know what the official report says, but you don't believe it. It wasn't a question. Elena met the woman's eyes. I believe your husband was a good man who cared about the people in his charge. And I believe that Marcus Washington has something important to tell you. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Sarah has been struggling. She keeps asking questions about that night, about why her father was in the infirmary, about what he was doing there. The official answers don't satisfy her. Then maybe this will give her some peace. Or maybe it will make everything worse. Jennifer's voice broke. What if I don't want to know? What if the truth is something I can't live with? Elena reached across the desk, a gesture that surprised them both. Mrs. Chen, I can't promise you that what Marcus has to say will be easy to hear, but I can promise you that she believes it's important. And I can promise you that I'll be there, and that we'll face whatever truth emerges together. Jennifer looked down at Elena's hand on hers, then nodded slowly. Okay, but I want Sarah there too. Whatever this woman has to say, my daughter deserves to hear it directly. And did you see the memorial was scheduled for Saturday afternoon in the prison chapel, a small space that served multiple faiths and none. Elena arrived early, watching as the chairs filled with officers, prison staff, and Chen's family. Sarah sat between her mother and grandmother, her young face set in lines too serious for 17. Marcus was brought in last, flanked by 2 guards. She'd been allowed to wear civilian clothes, a simple black dress that hung loose on her frame. Elena noticed how the other prisoners in attendance watched her, some with curiosity, others with something that looked like fear. The service began with the standard elements: prayers, remembrances, stories of Chen's dedication and kindness. Elena watched Marcus throughout, seeing the woman's focus never waver from Sarah's face. When it was time, Elena stood. We have one more speaker today. This is unusual, and I want to thank the Chen family for their courage in allowing this moment. She gestured to Marcus. Please. Marcus rose slowly, the guards tensing. She walked to the front of the chapel, her chains removed for the occasion, but her movements still careful, measured. She looked out at the assembled crowd, then focused on Jennifer and Sarah. Mrs. Chen, Sarah, thank you for letting me speak. Marcus's voice was clear, carrying to every corner of the small room. I'm going to tell you about your husband and father's last night. And I'm going to tell you the truth, even though it will be hard to hear. The room held its breath. 3 months ago, I was in the infirmary. I was at the lowest point of my life, and I had made a decision about how I wanted my story to end. Marcus paused, letting the implication settle. Officer Chen found me. And instead of following protocol, instead of calling for medical staff or writing a report, he sat down next to me and talked. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes locked on Marcus. He told me about you, Sarah, about how proud he was of you, how you were applying to colleges and dreaming big dreams. He told me that everyone deserves a chance at redemption, no matter what they've done. Marcus's voice thickened, and then he told me something else, something that would change everything. Elena felt her heart pounding. This was it, the moment of truth. He told me that he knew I was innocent. The chapel erupted. Voices overlapped. Chairs scraped against the floor, and the guards moved toward Marcus instinctively. But Elena raised her hand, her voice cutting through the chaos. Everyone sit down, now. The authority in her tone silenced the room. Jennifer Chen had gone pale, her hand gripping Sarah's. The young woman stared at Marcus with wide eyes, her mouth slightly open. Marcus remained standing, her posture straight despite the trembling in her hands. Officer Chen discovered evidence that proved I wasn't the person who assaulted the victim in my case. He found security footage that had been overlooked, witness statements that contradicted the prosecution's timeline. He spent weeks investigating on his own time. Elena felt the floor shift beneath her. This wasn't what she'd expected. That night in the infirmary, Marcus continued, he told me he was going to bring the evidence to the district attorney's office the next morning. He said he couldn't let an innocent person waste away in here, not when he had the power to change it. Her voice broke. He said that's what justice really meant. Sarah stood suddenly. Then why didn't he? Why didn't he bring the evidence forward? Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Because someone stopped him, someone who had a lot to lose if my case was reopened. The chapel went silent again, but this time the silence was different, charged, dangerous. Who? Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus looked directly at the back of the chapel, where a man in a suit had been standing quietly throughout the service. Assistant District Attorney Robert Morrison, the man who prosecuted my case, the man who built his career on a conviction he knew was false. Morrison's face went from red to white. This is slander. This is a desperate attempt by a convicted criminal to what? Marcus's voice was steady now. To clear my name? To honor the memory of a man who died trying to do the right thing? She reached into her dress pocket slowly, producing a small envelope. Officer Chen gave me this that night. He said if anything happened to him, I should make sure it reached the right people. Elena moved forward, her hand extended. Give me the envelope, Marcus. Not yet. Marcus held it close. Because once I hand this over, the truth becomes official. And I need everyone here to understand what that means. She looked at Morrison, who had gone very still. Officer Chen confronted you that night, didn't he? In the infirmary. He told you what he'd found, gave you a chance to do the right thing. Morrison's jaw clenched. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't, Marcus agreed. You can walk out right now. But these people deserve to know why a good man is gone, why his family is grieving, why his daughter has to grow up without her father. Sarah was crying now, her grandmother's arms around her. Jennifer stood frozen, her eyes moving between Marcus and Morrison. Chen told me what happened, Marcus said. He told me that you threatened him. Said you'd destroy his career, his reputation, his family if he went forward with the evidence. But Chen wasn't afraid of you. He said some things were worth fighting for, even if it cost him everything. Lies, Morrison spat. All lies from a convicted felon trying to manipulate. Then explain this. Marcus held up the envelope. Explain why Officer Chen wrote a detailed account of your conversation that night. Explain why he documented every piece of evidence he found. Explain why he gave it to me for safekeeping, because he knew you'd try to make it disappear. Elena felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Marcus, give me the envelope, now. Marcus looked at her, and Elena saw the trust there, the faith that had brought them to this moment. Slowly, Marcus extended her hand. But before Elena could take it, Morrison lunged forward. The guards reacted instantly, intercepting Morrison before he could reach Marcus. The chapel exploded into chaos again, people shouting, moving, trying to understand what was happening. Elena grabbed the envelope from Marcus's hand, holding it high. Everyone stop! Her voice rang out with judicial authority. Guards, detain Mr. Morrison. No one leaves this chapel until I've reviewed this evidence. Morrison struggled against the guards holding him. You have no authority here, Hartman. This is a prison, not your courtroom. Actually, Elena said coldly, as the presiding judge in Marcus Washington's case, I have every authority to review new evidence. And if what's in this envelope is what Marcus claims, you're going to have a lot more to worry about than my authority. She opened the envelope with steady hands, aware that every eye in the chapel was on her. Inside were several folded papers and a small USB drive. Elena scanned the first page, her heart sinking as she recognized Chen's handwriting. If you're reading this, something has happened to me. I'm writing this as insurance, as proof of what I've discovered and what I've been threatened with. Marcus Washington is innocent. The evidence I've gathered proves it beyond any doubt, but Ada Morrison has made it clear that he will do whatever it takes to keep this information buried, including threatening my family." Elena looked up at Jennifer and Sarah. "I'm so sorry. Your husband and father was a hero, and he paid the price for it." Jennifer's legs gave out, and she sank into her chair. Sarah knelt beside her mother, both of them crying now. The other officers in the chapel looked stunned, their eyes moving between Morrison and Marcus. "This is fabricated," Morrison said, but his voice had lost its conviction. Chen was unstable, everyone knew that. He was careful, Elena warned. "Every word you say right now can and will be used against you." She turned to the senior guard present. "Call the state police. Tell them we have a situation that requires immediate investigation." Marcus sat down heavily, her strength finally giving out. Elena moved to her side. "Why didn't you come forward with this sooner?" "Because I was afraid," Marcus admitted. "Afraid no one would believe me, afraid Morrison would find a way to make it disappear. But then I realized Chen didn't let fear stop him. How could I?" The next hours were a blur of activity. State police arrived, securing the chapel and beginning interviews. Morrison was taken into custody, still protesting his innocence, but with increasing desperation. Elena stayed with Marcus, ensuring the woman received medical attention and protection. Jennifer and Sarah approached as the chapel finally began to empty. Jennifer's eyes were red from crying, but there was something else there now, a kind of fierce determination. "Thank you," Jennifer said to Marcus. "Thank you for honoring my husband's memory, for making sure his sacrifice meant something." Marcus looked up, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry he had to—" "Don't." Jennifer's voice was firm. "Don't apologize for my husband's choices. He did what he believed was right. That's who he was." She paused, then reached out and took Marcus's hand. "And now we're going to make sure his work wasn't in vain." Sarah stepped forward, her young face set with resolve. "I want to help, whatever it takes to clear your name and make sure everyone knows what my dad did." Elena felt something break open in her chest. This was what justice looked like. Not the cold application of law, but the messy, complicated, beautiful work of making things right. Over the following weeks, the investigation expanded. The USB drive contained security footage, witness statements, and a detailed timeline that contradicted every major element of the prosecution's case against Marcus. More evidence emerged of Morrison's pattern of misconduct, other cases where he'd buried exculpatory evidence to maintain his conviction rate. Elena worked tirelessly, filing motions, coordinating with the State Attorney General's office, and ensuring that Marcus received proper medical care while the legal process unfolded. The media picked up the story, and public opinion shifted dramatically. But through it all, Elena kept thinking about that moment in the chapel when Marcus had trusted her enough to reveal the truth. When Jennifer and Sarah had chosen forgiveness over bitterness, when a community had come together to honor a fallen officer by continuing his work. 3 months later, Elena stood in her courtroom once more. But this time, Marcus Washington sat not at the defendant's table, but beside her attorney in the gallery. The courtroom was packed with reporters, supporters, and members of Chen's family. In light of the overwhelming evidence of prosecutorial misconduct and the clear demonstration of actual innocence, Elena read from her prepared statement, "This court hereby vacates the conviction of Marcus Washington and orders her immediate release from custody." The courtroom erupted in applause. Marcus stood slowly, her eyes finding Elena's across the room. The gratitude there was profound, but so was something else. A recognition that they had both been changed by this journey. After the formalities were complete, Elena found Marcus outside the courthouse. The woman looked different in civilian clothes, her hair styled, her face free of the prison pallor. But it was her eyes that had changed the most. They held hope now and possibility. "What will you do now?" Elena asked. Marcus smiled. "Jennifer Chen has offered me a job at the youth center she runs. She thinks I might have something valuable to share with kids who are at risk of making the same mistakes I almost made. That's wonderful, and I'm going to testify at Morrison's trial. Make sure Chen's story is told completely. Marcus paused. But first, I wanted to thank you for believing me, for taking that risk. Elena shook her head. You're the one who took the risk. You're the one who had the courage to speak up. We both did. Marcus extended her hand. And maybe that's what justice really is. People choosing to do the hard thing because it's the right thing. Elena took her hand, feeling the strength in Marcus's grip. Officer Chen would be proud. I hope so. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to honor what he did for me. 6 months later, Elena sat in her chambers reviewing case files when her assistant knocked. Judge Hartman, there's someone here to see you. Sarah Chen entered, looking older than her 18 years, but with a brightness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Hi, Judge Hartman. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. Please sit. Sarah settled into the chair across from Elena's desk. I wanted to tell you something. I've decided what I want to study in college. Oh, criminal justice. I want to be a lawyer. Sarah's voice was steady, confident. I want to help people like Marcus, people who get lost in a system that's supposed to protect them. And I want to make sure what happened to my dad, what he fought for, continues. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Your father would be incredibly proud of you. I know. And I wanted to thank you too, for listening to Marcus, for being willing to question everything, even your own decisions. Sarah leaned forward. My mum says that's what real integrity looks like, being willing to admit when you're wrong and doing whatever it takes to make it right. Your mother is a wise woman. She is, and she wanted me to give you this. Sarah pulled an envelope from her bag. It's from my dad's personal effects. We found it when we were going through his things. It's addressed to you. Eleanor took the envelope with trembling hands. After Sarah left, she sat alone in her chambers, staring at her name written in Chen's careful handwriting. Finally, she opened it. Judge Hartman, if you're reading this, it means something has happened to me, and Marcus Washington has found the courage to speak up. I'm writing this to you because I believe you're someone who values truth over convenience, justice over expediency. Marcus is innocent. I have proof. But more than that, she's a person who deserves a second chance, who deserves to have someone believe in her the way I believe in my daughter. I'm asking you to listen to her, to really listen, and to have the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. That's all any of us can do. Choose to be brave when it matters most. Thank you for being someone who understands that. David Chen. Elena sat with the letter for a long time, thinking about choices and consequences, about the ripples that spread from single acts of courage. Chen had made a choice to investigate, to question, to fight for someone everyone else had written off. Marcus had made a choice to trust, to speak up, to honor Chen's sacrifice, and Elena had made a choice to listen, to believe, to act. None of them had known how it would turn out. None of them had been certain they were making the right call. But they had all chosen to try, to risk, to believe that justice was worth fighting for. Elena pulled out a piece of paper and began to write. It was time to start documenting what she'd learned from this experience, the lessons about justice and mercy, about systems and individuals, about the courage it takes to admit when we're wrong, and the strength it takes to make things right. She thought about Marcus, now working with at-risk youth, sharing her story, and Chen's sacrifice. She thought about Sarah, preparing to enter law school with a passion for justice that had been forged in tragedy. She thought about Jennifer, who had chosen to honor her husband's memory by extending grace to the woman he'd tried to save. And she thought about Chen himself, an ordinary officer who had made an extraordinary choice, who had seen a person where others saw only a prisoner, who had valued truth over career, justice over convenience. The letter sat on her desk, a reminder of what was possible when people chose courage over comfort. Elena picked up her pen and continued writing, knowing that Chen's legacy would live on, not just in the case that had been overturned, but in the lives that had been transformed, in the choice to believe that redemption was possible, that people could change, that justice was worth fighting for, even when the cost was high, especially when the cost was high. A year later, Elena stood at the podium of a criminal justice reform conference, looking out at hundreds of faces, lawyers, judges, activists, formerly incarcerated individuals. Marcus sat in the front row, next to Jennifer and Sarah Chen. Behind them, Elena could see dozens of others whose cases had been reopened in the wake of Morrison's investigation, people who had been given second chances because one officer had been brave enough to question and one prisoner had been brave enough to speak. "We talk a lot about justice in this field," Elena began, "about laws and procedures, about rights and responsibilities. But sometimes we forget that justice isn't just about following rules. It's about seeing people, really seeing them." She told them about Chen, about his investigation and his courage. She told them about Marcus, about her trust and her determination. She told them about the moment in the chapel when everything had changed, when truth had broken through the careful structures they'd all built to protect themselves from uncertainty. "Officer David Chen taught me something I should have known all along," Elena said, "that our job isn't to be right, it's to be willing to be wrong and to have the courage to make it right when we are. That's what justice really means, not perfection, but the willingness to keep trying, to keep questioning, to keep believing that we can do better." The applause was thunderous, but Elena's eyes were on Marcus, who was crying openly, and on Sarah, who sat with her mother's hand in hers, both of them smiling through their tears. After the speech, people crowded around, wanting to talk, to share their own stories, to thank Elena for speaking up. But she made her way through the crowd to where Marcus stood waiting. "He would have been proud," Marcus said simply. "Chen, he would have been proud of all of this. We're just finishing what he started." "No," Marcus shook her head. "We're continuing it. There's a difference. What Chen started doesn't have an ending. It's a way of being, a way of seeing the world. And every time someone chooses courage over comfort, every time someone chooses truth over convenience, they're carrying on his work." Elena nodded, understanding. "So what's next for you?" Marcus smiled. "Jennifer and I are starting a foundation in Chen's name. We're going to provide legal support for people who believe they've been wrongly convicted, and we're going to train officers in how to really see the people in their care, how to question, how to investigate, how to be brave enough to stand up when something isn't right. That's incredible. It's necessary." Marcus's voice was firm, because Chen shouldn't have had to do what he did alone. The system should support people who question, who investigate, who fight for truth, and if it doesn't, we're going to change it. Sarah joined them, her eyes bright. "I'm going to intern with the foundation this summer, before I start law school." "Your father would be so proud," Elena said again. "I know." Sarah's smile was bittersweet. "I wish he could see it, but I think, in a way, he can. Every time we help someone, every time we fight for truth, he's there with us." That evening, Elena returned to her chambers one last time before heading home. She'd announced her retirement earlier that day, deciding it was time to step down from the bench and focus on reform work full-time. The decision had been easier than she'd expected. After everything that had happened, sitting in judgment felt less important than working to fix the system that had failed Marcus and so many others. She packed up the last of her personal items, including Chen's letter, which she'd kept in her desk drawer as a reminder of what mattered. As she looked around the chambers that had been her professional home for 2 decades, she felt not sadness but anticipation. There was so much work to do. So many people who needed someone to believe in them, to fight for them, to see them as more than their worst moments. And now she had the freedom to do that work without the constraints of her judicial role. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Thank you for everything, for believing, for acting, for showing me what justice really looks like." Chen's legacy lives on because of you. Elena smiled, typing back. It lives on because of all of us, because we chose courage, and we'll keep choosing it every day. She turned off the lights in her chambers and walked out into the evening. The city stretched out before her, full of people with stories, with struggles, with hopes for justice and redemption. Somewhere out there, someone was facing an impossible choice, wondering if anyone would believe them, if anyone would fight for them. And now, Elena was free to be that person. To be the one who listened, who questioned, who had the courage to admit when the system had failed and the determination to make it right. Chen had shown her the way. Marcus had trusted her to follow it. And now it was her turn to light the path for others. The work would never be finished. There would always be more cases, more injustices, more people who needed someone to see them and believe in them. But that was okay. Because justice wasn't a destination, it was a journey, one that required constant vigilance, constant courage, constant willingness to question and grow and change. Elena walked into the evening, ready for whatever came next, ready to honor Chen's memory by living his values, ready to continue the work that had begun with one officer's courage and one prisoner's trust, ready to keep choosing justice every single day. If stories of redemption and humanity touch your heart, please like this video and subscribe. It helps us continue sharing these powerful, true stories of transformation and hope.